What's up, everybody? It's Ripper here. I hope everybody's staying safe out there. On the screen with me is Jim Moore. Jim Moore used to work at Wildlife on Easy Street. Jim,
Volunteer.
oh, okay. He didn't work, he was a volunteer. So you didn't get paid when you were there. No,
No,
okay.
I never.
What did you do when you were at Wildlife on Easy Street?
Pretty much everything. My my first time showing up there, I had a neighbor. I lived right around the corner from Easy Street, and a neighbor of mine showed up and asked me if I wanted to go to a place where you could walk a leopard and play with leopards. And that really intrigued me. So I said, sure, absolutely, let's go. And we went over. This was probably sometime early in '95, and Carol was there by herself, and she was doing food prep, and my friend just wanted to go play with the two leopards that were there at the time were Nyla and Simba, and they were the second leopards. They lost the first set to Vernon Yates and some legal issues with Fish and Game, I think. But Carol was kind of overwhelmed with feeding, so I offered to help feed, and then I just kind of kept coming back. I've been looking for a place to volunteer at for a while, and when I kind of stumbled in there, it seemed like the perfect fit. So that was '95, and then there was some time that in '95 where I didn't go out there as much because I was dating somebody that wasn't really into animals and the outdoor scene. So I kind of got distracted by that. But then I kind of came back into it in '95, late '95, and was there until I eventually left in mid 2000.
Okay, so what were you doing before 95? Um, were you working with cats before that, or what kind of stuff were you doing?
No, no, no. I have had the same job. I worked in the collision repair industry. And matter of fact, I've had the same job for 36 years. And this was kind of a way for me to. I've been looking for places to give back to, and I looked at Lowry Park Zoo and some different opportunities. And like I said, then I stumbled across their place, and it just kind of seemed like a perfect fit. I had no idea until much later on, until Don disappeared, that he was a millionaire. I had no concept of that, no clue whatsoever, that he was worth that much money. But because it was never visible from seeing him or dealing with him that he was worth that much money.
So you went out there to volunteer because you wanted to help the needy.
I wanted to help out, and I had extra time. I mean, it's not completely altruistic. I mean, you're getting something in return for it. You know, you're giving your time, but obviously you're filling a hole, a void that you have, and that's So I mean, I'm not saying that it was just purely out of the goodness of my heart. I had time on my hands. I wanted to do something productive with it, and it just seemed like a good fit at the time. And I got Don. Like I said, he was going a lot on business deals and stuff, and but I spent a lot of time feeding with him, and he was really a good guy. I mean, Don, there are certain descriptions. As a matter of fact, I saw an article that they only quoted me a little bit from, I think, 2009, and my same description of him is the one that I've given this year, and I didn't even remember, and it was the exact same one. That if you saw Don on the street, you'd give him $1, because that's how he looked.
Right.
I did add this year that Don would actually take the dollar and thank you for it and keep the dollar, but he was always in blue jeans, t-shirts. He was very unassuming. He drove vehicles that their primary color was Bondo and rust, and you would not have ever known. I remember his employees commenting all the time they get in trouble if they actually bought a part for something. And his question was, why did you buy a part? Why didn't you fix that part? He was a very frugal person. It was not a character flaw, a failing, a mental defect. He was frugal. A lot of successful people, a lot of people with money are that way. And that's how he was. And that's the only way I ever took it, was that he was cautious with his money. He didn't spend it if he didn't have to.
All right, so you worked with him, you spent a lot of time with him, and did you notice if he was having early signs of dementia or anything wrong with his brain?
Not at all. Don was very sharp, and he had a good memory. He was very social. He always had a kind word. He was never inappropriate. I've heard a lot of stories of that floating around about, and I don't know if these are, how many of these stories are true. I can't say that I know Don from every aspect, but I never saw him display any signs of dementia or Alzheimer's or forgetfulness or just anything that would create pause in my that would give me concern for him. And I never saw anything as far as his behavior with female volunteers. He was friendly and flirty, I guess would be the way to describe it. He was never inappropriate that I ever saw, and I never heard anybody complain to me or to other volunteers that made it back to me about inappropriate behavior with Don. So when I started hearing all this, I was concerned that he's not here to defend himself anymore, and these accusations are being, thrown about his mental state and about and about his attitude with women. And I just, again, maybe those things, maybe the flirtatious was more than I knew about. But like I said, I never saw it. I never saw it firsthand, and I never heard about it. And I was pretty well tapped into most of the volunteer corps there. Now, when I first started there was really no volunteer program. Carol would kind of document the different stages that that I had been there the longest. That's the longest somebody lasted as a volunteer, because they just didn't have that many. I think Susan Aronoff was there that time, but she didn't really volunteer that much. I didn't see her do a whole lot of stuff there on property. Doug Edwards, I think he was there, but there wasn't really a huge volunteer corps. Most of the work was being done by them, by staff, and I think there was a couple of people here and there, but it was really nothing like it eventually came. There was just nobody really there early on.
Okay, so you fed big cats, and you talked about food prep. As soon as you talked about food prep, people start commenting to ask about the meat grinder. And okay. I know you've heard stories.
Yeah, that's probably, it makes for great, copy and great, a great, I don't know, internet stories, and but when I first started there, again, in '95, I remember walking in the gate, and as soon as you turn right, there was an older cabin there, and behind that cabin was a walk-in freezer. That was our original food prep. There was an overhang on the right side of the building, and there was a workbench, and they had these 55-gallon barrels that the chunks of meat would be floating and thawing in. And at that point, they were feeding leg quarters and chunks of meat. They were not grinding anything when I first started there. Okay, so all this talk about grinders early on, before that, '94, and I think there's somebody that said that there were two of them there and this and that. There could have been two of everything on that property. That property was a junkyard when they moved into it, and Don was a collector of junk. He would go out and just collect. Again, it's that old expression, one man's treasure. And for Don, he saw treasure in every piece of junk there was, and he didn't want to get rid of any of it. And so it's possible there were grinders there. There was cement. There was all kinds of equipment, construction equipment, construction materials, you name it, and you could find it on that property. There was a guard shack there at one point. There was so much debris and junk out there on the property. It was like walking through a different area, and you could literally get lost out in it. That was how much stuff there was out in there. When he started grinding, he was using a bench grinder, and food prep eventually, I think probably somewhere in '96, I think the food prep went from up front on the property back off the lake. I think you have a picture of where that wound up at. And basically it first started with some concrete culverts back there and some screening awning, and that's how we prepped stuff. And then he basically had a shipping container there, which became the main food prep area. There were some coolers, a bank of 3 coolers outside And then on this if you're facing food prep from the road, to the right was a big truck freezer body, if you will, like on the back of a semi, because it was elevated very high up. You had to walk up several steps to get into the freezer area. I remember that freezer distinctly because Don had bought all this, just a shipment of Wendy's chicken patties, and he was trying to feed them to the cats. At that time, he was trying to grind them, and half of them were boneless fillets, which the cats took to pretty well. The other half were the breaded fillets, which they didn't like. And he tried everything he could to get the breading off these things. He tried to float them in. He tried to grind them up with the breading. They didn't like that. He tried to float them in water. I mean, he told me he tried everything to get the breading off. Finally, he just let the volunteers, kind of a foreshadowing of Joe Exotic. The volunteers basically wound up eating all the chicken patties out of that freezer. But at that point, there was he did most of the grinding and of the meat, but I never saw any large commercial grinder. Now I worked, like I said, the full-time job Monday through Friday, and I was there every night after work to feed. Sometimes he liked to feed when it was very cool, and sometimes he would send me home and say, "Come back at 8 o'clock, come back at 10 o'clock, and we'll feed," because it was just he felt it was too hot. So he typically took care of food prep before I got there, but like I said, I never saw a big industrial grinder. The building in food prep that, like I said, you have the photo of. It was a very narrow area. We had sinks in it, and there was a bench at the back of it, but there wasn't anything like that in there. Okay. And he did the grinding for a while, and then but it was always a problem. They didn't like that food very much, so it was always a fight because most of us that were feeding it, Carol and everybody else, didn't really want to feed it because the cats weren't taking to it, but he thought it was going to be a better feed for them. Now, eventually we wound up buying a pre-ground diet, and that's kind of the one things that got kind of switched over to.
So you never saw a commercial meat grinder?
No.
Okay.
And there was no, let me also, the people that were food prepping were Don, and then after Don wasn't doing it, the staff was doing it. Either John, there was two Johns, John McKinney and Vern, and then John. There was another John, I think, John McKinnon, I think was his name. I think I talked to you about him before.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the first. The two Johns. So he was the first John. They would set out the meat. They would have it pulled out of the freezer and thawing so that when we got there, it would be ready to go. Volunteers at that time, up until I left, were not doing any of that kind of work. It was just being done by Vern's assistants, or before that by Don.
Okay. The reason, well, so there could have been a commercial meat grinder there, but you never, I mean, you might not have ever been in the area or done anything to say, because you weren't doing the food prep, right?
Right, but I mean, again, the grinder I saw at the front of the property was, I remember seeing Don back there grinding, but it was a bench grinder that you crank up. It was not a very,
okay.
Don had a lot of stuff, but not all of it worked. I mean, a lot of it didn't work, So it's possible he had 10 grinders out there, but that didn't mean they were working.
Right, I got
you. I mean,
you.
there was a lot of junk on that property, a ton of it.
I've heard there was a lot of junk that, I mean, Don would buy junk and turn around and sell it for a profit. Somehow, some way he would make a profit off of it.
He would.
But there might have been some things that he used as markers, where he would bury something and then put a piece of machinery over it. Those are some of the stories that I've heard, and he wouldn't want that stuff sold because that's how he knew where he had buried money.
Yeah, I haven't heard that recently, but it's possible, sure.
All right, so you get there in 95, and that's when you start volunteering. And you have these different shirts. There's different colors. When you first started out there, what color shirt did you have?
Similar to actually, Debbie actually commented on my uniform. It was typically tank top and cargo shorts and work boots. That was my uniform.
That
I
was
never
your.
wore short.
Oh, you didn't wear
I
one of the shirts. Did you?
no, I was.
Did you send me a picture of that uniform, the tank top? Were there any pictures like that that you sent
I
or
don't know
not?
if I sent that to you.
I don't.
Probably for.
I don't remember
It'll
seeing
probably
one.
be out. I'm sure it will show up somewhere. The first uniforms that I think that we actually got. Now I don't remember what year we did that Publix commercial. Well, we did a Publix commercial out there, and they had some different shirts for us. And I actually, there's no way to show it to you now, but I think one of the earliest uniform incarnations was actually those Publix shirts. Several of us got them from the commercial, so we just started wearing them at different events when we were trying to do some offsite events and such. But the shirt thing didn't come in until when did that come into? Well, it was definitely before while Don was still there, because if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the pictures I sent you shows red shirts, and that picture is February '97. So
Let me see
so
if I
that
can.
means those.
Which picture was it?
I think it was on the beach. Is there some red shirts in the picture there? I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Is that it there? Where Jamie? Um, can you see the picture on the screen?
No, I can't.
You can't see it.
No. Sorry.
can, uh, can
I
anyone
see
else see
you.
that? Can anyone else see this picture on the screen? It's going to be funny if I'm the only one that can see it. All right, they can see it. All right, they can see the picture. It looks like
I'm not sure exactly where.
it looks like there's a tiger and a
Yeah. Okay. That's all right. I've got the picture here. Then.
okay,
Yeah.
that's the one
That's,
right there. There's two red
yeah.
shirts.
So that's the because I have a date when I think there's another one you got of being Carol Lynn's got a date of February of '97. So obviously that shirt came in probably somewhere right around, I would say, probably sometime in '96 is probably when that was done. We formed a volunteer. Carol formed a volunteer committee, and I was on that, and several. Jamie, her daughter, was on it, and that's when the whole shirt color thing kind of came up. And yeah, the one of my I don't know if I can get this up here or not, but yeah, there's the
Hold on,
that's
wait.
just the date. One of the volunteers had taken these pictures, and thankfully it was back in the processing days, so they stamped the date on it, which is the only reason I have an actual date on them. But yeah, I had actually designed after you wearing the Public shirts. I designed a khaki shirt, which I was using to events. That's the only other shirt that I really wore. And I don't know if you can. This is kind of not very professional, but this is if you can see there. That was the shirts that Publix made for us, and it had over the chest. It just said Wildlife on Easy Street and had a paw print and stuff. It was just something that they did to, for the shoot. So then we came up with the khaki shirts. And then after that, with the volunteer committee, it was pushed to do the color coded, the green for go, yellow for caution, and red for stop was the simplistic version of that.
Okay, where did that idea come from for those shirts? Do you know?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. It got bound. Carol was in there were several people in the volunteer committee at that point. There were several people that were in favor of that, and there were other people that weren't so much in favor of that. I just don't remember who actually came up with the actual concept. I was never a huge fan of it, but it didn't affect me that much, so I didn't really care too much. So.
All right. So from '95 to the time that Don was there, before he went missing, what was your title? Like, did you have a title? Like, were you the head volunteer or
Well, I was on the volunteer committee, and like I said, at that point, there really hadn't been any, until they started getting the shirts, and then we started getting more volunteers. There really hadn't been any kind of long-term volunteers there. So I don't know that I really had a title. There was at one point Carol approached me and said that her and Don had talked about hiring me and to see what it would take to get me away from my job and to go to work there, but the money just wasn't close. But I was flattered by that. I mean, it showed that they both thought enough about me to do that. And Don had invited me to move. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. In February of '96, we had 2 black leopards born there to a female leopard named Lola, and I had a really good relationship with Lola. And it wasn't necessarily to do with me per se. It could have just been that I reminded her of her previous owner, because he was a guy, and sometimes animals will respond to certain physical characteristics of voice, smell. You never know for sure. But Don, I remember him telling me that it was the darndest thing. He said that this cat, she was fully clawed leopard. She was a small leopard. She was probably, well, I shouldn't say small, average female Asian leopard. She was about 65, 70 pounds. And but Don said she would crawl up this guy's back and fully clawed, just walk up his back and then just hang on his shoulder. And just, but he had to give her and a cougar up. Something happened, and it wasn't an abuse situation. I think he just had to give him up. And after her getting there, she was really standoffish, hated everybody, and she's fully clawed, so she was dangerous. And I don't know, I was fascinated by the black leopards, and I spent a lot of time with her and wound up having a rapport with her. And then in February '96, she gave birth to 2 leopard cubs, and I helped. I went into the nursery they had there on property, a little mini trailer, and started helping raise those with Don and Carol. And eventually, they gave me one of the leopards, Magic, and it's something that it's the greatest gift that I've ever gotten. I mean, I owe so much to both of them, but it was something that it changed the next 25 years and counting in my life. I mean, I'm still involved in exotic animals. I'm still doing it to this day, and I'll continue doing it to the day I die. So it was completely one of those. I mean, other than my mom giving me the gift of life, I mean, that was the next biggest thing in my life. I mean, it literally has changed 25 years and counting in my life.
Do you have any kids?
No, not that I'm aware of, but. Never be 100% sure of anything, can we? But no.
Well,
aware of, though.
If you want to find out, let us know. We'll see if we can start researching. But so the picture that you have, the picture you have on the wall behind you.
Thanks. Yeah. All paternity tests. Hey, I'm on 23andMe, so you can go check it out if you want. So,
is that a picture of Magic?
I don't know if I have him on that or not. I might. I'm not sure which picture I used.
What about the picture behind you? The picture right behind you.
No, that's not Magic.
Really?
That's a print by an artist, Charles Frosset.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that was, like I said, it was just an attraction to the grace and beauty of the animals. But so yeah, after he was born, it was pretty much game on. I was there. That's him.
That's Magic right there.
Baby. I'm sure, but I helped with. We had multiple animals in there. I'm not sure if that person behind me. I don't know if that's Carol back there. I'm not sure who that is. But we had Magic, Jumanji in there. We had we wound up with a tiger named Aurora was in there. We had some cougar cubs in there at that time we were raising. And
is that
that's Magic. And, yep, with Carol. That was probably at one of the events. We were a little barbecue that we would do on the beach. You saw the earlier scene too. That was from the same event, same volunteer. Let's take those pictures. Yeah, same.
Okay, I got to ask you: was this picture staged, or did you two just stare into each other's eyes like that, or was that like someone taking the picture and say, "Look at each other, so I can take this picture? What's the story behind this?
Well, I probably, I always had 100 questions to ask them, and Carol, particularly a lot of times, because I'd never been around these cats before. I had no experience. Whatever was happening, I took it for that's what needed to happen, and that's what they had all the answers. So I was always like, if I saw her, I might have 10 questions about magic. Hey, what should I do about this? And hey, I need to do this. And what should I do? I mean, there was just always something. So I was probably talking to her about something about with him.
I got you, because although when they started, they didn't know a lot, like how to take care of a lot of the animals. But as time went on, they did become experts in taking care of these animals.
Well, and I got to tell you, because like I said, I knew nothing. I knew less than nothing. And for example, with Magic, and if you see some of his baby pictures, he is horribly ugly. He looks like a little werewolf. And the reason, I'll try and find one while we're talking. And the reason for that is, I got rid of everything, most of everything, a few years back. It was kind of one of those things where, I'm trying to lead the minimalist lifestyle. So holding on to a lot of this stuff is just counterproductive. So I started getting rid of a lot of things. And I had all his information when he was being raised, all the little daily journals. She would have logs to show the feeding times, because you went from like every 2 hours to every 3 hours. And so she had everything logged, and then whether they would poop and what condition that was in, so you could track any kind of health problems. You had to keep weights. So if you saw that with a small animal like that, if you have the slightest weight loss, it can be lethal really quickly. So there were these really just exhaustive charts about what was going on, and a lot of their food entries were they were being tube fed. And meaning that you'd snake a tube down their throat into their stomach, and then basically put a syringe on the end of it and squeeze that in and pump the food right into them. Well, when I raised the second leopard and the last leopard I ever raised was Kaya. I was tutored by Dolores Newman, who, as I told you, was the godmother of all exotic animals. And I talked to her about, well, what happens if she doesn't eat? I don't know how to tube. You never tube feed a cat. You never have to do that. And I never did. I never had to tube her. The other thing was, when we were trying to get them onto solid food, what we would do is, and I'm sure there's a picture of it, but we would put them in a tote, in a big Rubbermaid tote, and put like baby food mixture all over them and let them clean it off each other. And this would lead to them getting baths almost on a daily basis, and it would cause the loss of fur on their face. And I don't know if you can see it. It wasn't anything that was permanent or anything, but I don't know if you can see that around the muzzle area. The fur would just fall off. So he was hideously ugly as a baby. But again, I didn't have this knowledge. I didn't know anything. So everything that they did, I just assumed that they knew more than I did. But you're right; they didn't really know a whole lot more than I did about it. So, and that was one of the stories too. That, well, let me back to the picnic thing, which was kind of a funny Don story. One of the things that Don did was, when we had these little volunteer cookouts, he would go get some chicken to cook out on the grill. Yeah,
it's from this one, right?
It would be like that. We had several of those like that.
Okay.
We do it. I can't remember how often we did it, once a month or something like that. But we tried to do these little cookouts and get-togethers for the volunteers. But Don would sometimes go get some chicken from the freezer. Well, he didn't go to the freezer in his house to get it. He went to the freezer where the cat food was stored. And not all their chicken was, quote unquote, human consumable. You can get chicken that's not human consumable anymore, might have carbon on it, or something like that. You have to knock that off. And I made sure that I never ate any of his grilled chicken. So But
So,
this is an equal opportunity. Don would eat it himself. It wasn't like it's just like when I first found out about the dumpster diving. I was in the, we were done feeding one evening, and we were in the kitchen, and he was offering me, had this counter full of breads and donuts and pastries. And he's like, well, I'm going to give the bread to the llamas and stuff, but I got some good donuts here, and help yourself, whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, great. So I'm loading up. And then I can't remember now if it was Susan or Carol later on that told me to go, he goes and gets that out of the dumpster. But again, he was not, this was Don. It's fair is fair. It wasn't like he just did it for the animals or did it and as a joke to give to other people. He consumed it himself. He was not above that. This was just, and I remember him telling me, you see, it's perfectly good stuff. There's nothing wrong with it, and he was adamant that it was fine. He would not eat it if it wasn't. It would not offer it to anybody if it wasn't fine to eat.
right.
So, but again, that was just Don. He was very, very frugal. So. But he was a good man. He was a really good man. He was a guy that was very friendly. And if Don told me something, I took him at his word. I never questioned anything that he told me. If he said something, I could take it to the bank. When he actually was the one that approached me about moving out there on property before he disappeared. And I never for a second, I had concerns after he went missing. I had a relationship with Carol, but Carol is just a much different person. She is, and again, you can people take this and do different things with it, but I don't know if it's just that she has trust issues. You can obviously you can make whatever you want out of any situation, but she was more comfortable having people around her that were beholden to her. And if you owed something to her, you were more likely to be on that inner circle. When I moved out there, I was constantly, if I had to pay for something for Magic and she wouldn't take it, I'd just go put it in the donation jar. It wasn't a question of, for me, it was just, I just want to pay my own way. I didn't want to be held to a different standard, or I didn't want people to think that I was just, skating off of their situation, taking money away from their sanctuary, their animals. And so I just always wanted to be, responsible for my own bills. And when I moved out there, I bought the mobile home. I think I don't know if you don't have a great picture of it because they put up a privacy fence. I think the picture was from 2011. But I bought the mobile home. I had a mortgage on it. Yeah, so straight down the dirt road is the main gate to Easy Street, and you can kind of see in the white part of the where the screening is. That was actually where the gate opened and closed, and then the mobile home behind there was mine. And then eventually we built Vernon John actually built a cage right behind that mobile home that became Magic's cage. Prior to that, his cage, you would go right in the main gate and you would turn left, and his cage was back to the left back there, in his cage that I had built with the help of some of the volunteers there.
So you lived right there, and you had brought up Don invited you to live out there. Was there, before he did that, was there anything, had you and Carol been getting along, or was there an issue or anything? Because I thought there was something that happened, and then I think Carol, did Carol say that Don, what did she say, that Don didn't like you, or he had accused you of liking Carol or something? You know what story I'm talking about?
Well, I saw that recently, and that's the first time I ever heard that before. And I, well, actually, I heard it twice. I was asked about it in a recent interview with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department, and then I saw it on. I think it was somebody had a link on to Carol, one of Carol's video vlogs, and that was there. And I can't imagine that being the case, not with the fact that he was actively talking to me about moving down to Costa Rica, that he had tried to hire me on, to work there on the property, and that he was the one that invited me to, to move out there. And he was also, he was responsible along with Carol in giving me magic. So, I mean, I can't imagine you would do all those things to somebody that you thought might be, having relationships with your wife. I mean, but again, I'll say that same thing with her. I never had any, there were a lot of times that her and I were on property together. There were a lot of times that we had late nights in that cub trailer feeding cubs. And when Don was off property, and she never made any inappropriate, advances towards me whatsoever. I never felt uncomfortable in a sexual way at all. Now, I did feel that I didn't have the same level of rapport with her that I had with Don, and some things that happened, that I haven't gone into a lot of detail, but some things that happened that gave me pause and gave me concern about her character. And, so I had concerns, and I probably, in hindsight, I should have probably, she didn't want me to pay a lot fee to be there. She didn't want me to pay for Magic's food, but I paid for Magic's food. I paid for supplements, and I paid I think it was $150 a month lot fee to be there. And I guess in hindsight, if I hadn't, maybe she would have felt that that I would have been more, I don't know, that I would have been, she could trust me more or something. I don't know. I don't know exactly how her mind worked like that. I mean, she never had to worry about trusting me. There's nothing I wouldn't have done for the two of them. I mean, like I said, they gave me one of the greatest gifts I ever got. So
right, and there were some people out there that they didn't pay for anything. Their food was provided. They were kind of stuck out there, so to speak. I mean, if they were volunteering, then it seems like a good deal because you get a free place to live and food. And then I don't know if they got an allowance or something. So it's kind of it seems like it would be a cool thing, but you don't have like a real job in case you needed to get out. You're kind of stuck. Is that
right? Yeah, that's the way I never. Yeah, I didn't want to be in that situation, as in working for them or the Costa Rica situation. I never really got too heavy in the conversations with Don with that, because that's just not something I could have seen myself doing. But because you had to have certain requirements to have a Class 1 cat, I knew that I needed to do something to be able to be with, to have Magic around full time, not just, go there at night to see him and be there on the weekends and stuff like that. So I started talking to them about buying property. Don had told me that he had been letting Carol dabble in the way he kind of put it was he'd been giving her some money to let her kind of hone her skills at purchasing real estate. He didn't seem to be all that impressed with the first results of it. Matter of fact, a piece of property she had offered me was a piece of property off of Dale Mary, which is a big area, and it's a very developed area. It's probably right. Carrollwood is an area that's called, but it was environmentally protected, and I think it was leftover from an apartment development. So they kind of set aside this acreage that was basically a swampland, and it was protected where you couldn't really develop it. Don wasn't really happy about that deal, and I went out there and looked at it, because, like I said, at that point when Don was there, I was talking to them about buying a piece of property, which is what led. They purchased. It was a neighbor's property that was right outside their gate, 2.5 acres. They had purchased that. So, as a matter of fact, I think when I first got in there, there was some impasse problems getting from the back of my property into Easy Street. I hang gate with Magic, so that's how I had to come and go every time I'd bring him, over, to hang out with me in my home. But like I said, it was one of those things where I don't know. I don't know that I would have ever really. I just couldn't imagine being in a situation where I couldn't have provided and I would have been at somebody's mercy like that. I couldn't do that. That's just not my nature. So,
Right.
and I didn't want to take away from it. There was one of the volunteers that was out there on Doug Edwards. He was a tour guy. That's basically all I did was tours, and he helped Carol on stuff on the side with real estate and stuff like that, and looking and scouting and doing things. And I don't know everything that was involved there in their relationship. He was a friend of Carol's for sure, and he was tied to her financially outside of Easy Street. But even at Easy Street, she was paying him to do tours. And that was always a problem for me and a lot of the volunteers, because we're trying to give of our time, and we're doing not just tours, but we're building cages and feeding and doing all this other manual work. And he's getting paid to do tours. It was something that was a little bit of a sticking point. And,
right.
Matter of fact, at some point after Dawn disappeared, it actually came up, because I got in a little bit of a hot water with Carol, because something had come up with Doug, and she had sent me an email, and the gist of it was that him and Susan were the only two that could save the sanctuary. After Dawn disappeared, it was a constant battle. She would always say with his kids and Anne, and that they were trying to close down the sanctuary, close and take away the animals and this and that. So everything was always about that constant fight. And she had told me there was some issue that I can't remember what had happened with Doug, but there was an issue with him, and she was chastising me that those two people held the security, the future of Easy Street in their hands, and if we basically treated them like crap and ran them out and did this, what motive would they have for going to court and standing up and protecting Easy Street? So, and I don't know, I guess that was probably about the legal documents that you had mentioned earlier. That's probably what that had to do with.
All right, so Doug and Susan were holding the place together per Carol. Was Susan?
Well, her fate. She said they held her fate in their hands.
Okay.
It's basically, I'm paraphrasing here now for 23 years, but that's pretty much what she was implying. Yeah.
Right.
And again,
was Susan in a position like Doug, where she was kind of trapped out there, or was it different for Susan?
Yeah, Susan, like I said, she was there when I first started there, and I don't remember her doing a lot of anything. I've heard stuff about cooking and house cleaning. That's something I never saw Susan ever do. And I didn't see any fondness with Dawn either. Dawn particularly didn't like Susan. The most you get out of Dawn with Susan was teasing her, relentlessly, mean teasing, and that was about as nice as Dawn was with her. At one point, there was something that had happened on property, and Dawn was basically ready to throw her off property. And at some point, he wound up throwing her off property, and she came back after he went missing. And I don't know the arrangement that they had for that, but her and Carol were always tight. I mean, if Carol was going to hang out with somebody, it was Susan. They were constantly going out to lunch or dinner or something. The two of them were always hanging out. So when I saw that, and Don was, like I said, Don was not a fan of Doug's or Susan's. To the best of my knowledge, he didn't. There was nothing there from him for either one of those two people. So to see their signatures as witnesses on two of his legal documents, yeah, that raised all kinds of flags with me. I didn't understand that for a second.
All right, so
this is something you and I talked about.
Yeah, you're talking about the power of attorney and the will, because Doug and Susan's signatures were on both of those documents. But you're saying when Don went missing, he had kicked Susan off the property. Like, he didn't like
Correct.
Susan, and
nope,
he didn't like Doug either.
No, I don't think he was a fan of Doug's, because Doug didn't really do anything out there. Don was very much a hands-on worker. I mean, he was the kind of guy that, he might want you to, if you were his employee, he might work you 10 hours a day, but he's going to be out there working 12 right next to you, shoulder to shoulder.
Uh-huh.
You know, when we were building cages, doing stuff, he was right out there in the trenches. He was not letting other people do it. He wasn't hiring people to do it. He was out there doing it. I mean, he was a worker. He was a hard worker. No doubt about it. But
So when you saw these two names or heard that their names were on the power of attorney and the will, what was your first thought?
that wouldn't have happened. That, in my opinion, Don would have never had them witness legal documents, you know, for him. He wouldn't have done that.
When
Now again,
go ahead.
Here we go, though. This is something that you and I have talked about. You know, when he went missing, I was never interviewed by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Some people out there were, and most of them were people, what I would call weekend warriors. They'd come out, you know, on a Saturday or Sunday, and that would be the extent of what they'd be out there. They weren't close to Don. They weren't out there on property. They weren't out there enough to be, you know, to be really that actively involved in things. There was a lot of things I fed with Don. I spent time with Don. And I was never interviewed. And matter of fact, it went so long at some point, and I was living out on property. And I don't know exactly when it happened. It might have been 3 months, 6 months, it might even have been a year. And I even told Carol, I said, look, they never talked to me. I think I would have been out of all the people they did speak to, I would have been more relevant to speak to than the people they did interview. So I called in, and I don't know who I talked to, but I remember I was sitting at my computer desk at the mobile home on Easy Street. I remember that much for sure. And I called in, and I told them a lot of different things. I told them about the last time I saw Don. I told them about that Don had mentioned to me about a gun going missing, and he had concerns about, but he never said a person. He said them is the way he phrased it. I told them another story about an employee there by the name of Tim. I told them some other stuff, and so I thought I did my bit. Now, they never questioned me about things. They never asked me about things. And 23 years ago, if they had said, "Oh, hey, by the way, who are the players here? And by the way, we have this POA and we have this document. What do you think about these people on this?" I would have absolutely at that point raised flags, but they never talked to me. I didn't know about. I knew there was stuff going on that involved Doug and Susan, but I didn't know all the intricacies of it. I didn't know how many forms. You know, there was 2 different forms with their signatures and stuff going on. So it definitely I would have raised flags with them at that point had they ever talked to me.
Right.
Recently,
Let me clear something up because people are confused, because earlier you said you didn't talk to law enforcement, and then you said you have talked to them. I already know, but there's people in the chat that they're confused. So let me explain. In the beginning, when Don went missing, law enforcement didn't question you. You called them and gave them a statement. And then recently you have talked to them.
I wanted to, because there were some timeline issues that were being brought up that were causing me concern about the last time he was seen and last time I saw him. And after 23 years, obviously memories and timelines have kind of faded away. And so I reached out to them to reinforce my statement with them. And that's when they informed me that they had no trace of it, that it was not there.
They lost your original statement.
Yeah, and this is what I've told. When I was a part of several things over the course of years that had to do with Don's disappearance and with animals and such. As with all the different drama going on. And then at one point, I decided, okay, enough. I'm done. I'm just moving on. I'm not going to keep revisiting this stuff year after year. And matter of fact, Debbie Sandlin had approached me when Tiger King was first doing their round 1 5 years ago, and I just told her, no, I'm going to pass on that. And the only reason I decided this time to do it was that I had 2 motivations, and I told this when I was talking to Rebecca. My 2 motivations are that I owe it to Don if I can help with any of the information, if I can help solve what happened to him, I owe that to him for what he did for me, because he changed my life. And if I can do something to bring the focus back to what's going on with exotic animals, because it's so lost with the Joes and the Carols of the world, if I can bring it back to the animals, that I wanted to do that because I owe it to the animals as well. And so I don't really have any other motivation. I've had a sanctuary for the last, we're on our 20th year this year, but we're winding down. Unfortunately, we lost a bunch of cats recently due to old age, and the ones we have left are older. We're probably not going to continue with big cat rescues. We will continue with trying to help them and trying to make sure that captive wildlife of all types is treated with a lot better respect than it's getting right now. But I just felt like those are the two things that needed to happen, and that's why I decided to start, speaking to people and speaking out. I don't really, like I said, I don't need the 15 minutes. I don't need the publicity for this place. And if I can help, as I've done with you, I've given people names that would know things. These are the people, one or more of them can answer the questions. And if law enforcement gets involved, which is my hope, is to raise enough public groundswell that the DA, that law enforcement will then take these, I don't know. They'll do what you're doing and what other people are doing, that the media is doing. They'll do the same thing, and that they're the ones that are eventually going to be able to, to affect, an arrest and do something. And I'm just hoping that doing these interviews and getting enough public, support will push that narrative where they'll start doing that. And that's what I'm hoping is going to come out of doing this. Is not right. That that we're going to be able to fix this and solve it, but at least that it gets it enough out there that it will get back to them, and that they will get more involved in this. Because I've always said there's two crimes that happen here. What happened to Don is crime number one. Crime number two is the investigation that was done 23 years ago. I mean, in my opinion, you've only got a couple of options here. Either I knew all these people out there. Yeah, you know where I'm going. I know all these people. Nobody there was criminal mastermind, Jack. Okay, nobody was. So what are we saying here? That this investigation that was done then was that incompetent, or was it tainted? I mean, it's somebody's got to pick this and figure it out. And it just troubles me to no end that because of that, we might not ever have an answer about what happened to Don. And it's not fair. It's not fair, because it could have been, if these questions were asked back then, we might have these answers now.
Right. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here, because just today someone was going around saying that I was paying people for interviews. Now, you and I have talked quite a bit over the last 2 months. Have I ever paid you? Have I ever offered you money or anything like that?
No, you seem kind of tight.
I am very tight, but yeah.
I've given you all the names of the players that I knew that would have inside information. There was definitely friends of Carol, friends of Don kind of deals. And there were people that were more wrapped up and had more financial purse strings to Carol, such as Susan and Doug Edwards and such. And I've given you the names of employees that were out there that would potentially know things. Everything that I have, I'm sharing with everybody equally. If they ask me, here it is. Law enforcement asked me, I told them.
Right. And you have given me a lot of names, and you have given me a lot of information. Let's talk about the last time you saw Don, because we have your 95 through 97, and then after he went missing with Susan and Doug and law enforcement. But when was the last time you saw Don?
Dawn was, I was out there on the weekend, and it would have been, it was very quiet. There was really nobody else on property. I don't remember seeing anybody else other than Dawn. And there's one volunteer out there, Jamie, who you have in the picture. It was not Jamie Carroll's daughter, Jamie. It was a volunteer out there, right. And her and I were out there taking pictures with Magic, my black leopard. And we pretty much had the place to ourselves. And Don approached me and said that he had a gentleman that's coming over. He was buying a motorcycle because he was filling up this shipping container to ship out to Costa Rica. And I think he already had a couple of motorcycles in it. They might have been dirt bikes, as a matter of fact. But this guy was driving a motorcycle over, and he lived in St. Pete. And Don was asking me if I could take the guy home because he had so much to do to get ready for this trip. And I said, sure. The guy got there, Don bought the motorcycle, and I took the guy home. Jamie and I went and drove him to St. Pete. I don't remember his name, the address. Just remember going over the bridge. And I remember by the time we got back, yeah, because it's about from Easy Street to St. Pete's about, well, you've been traveling the area, so it's probably a 40-minute trip one way. So by the time we got it, it was late enough in the day that the light was gone, and I think we were pretty well done. And that would have been Sunday. And it was definitely that last weekend, because he was rushed, and he was buying this. I remember the container being out there. It was behind the Tiger area, and I remember where it was. And like I said, I'm pretty sure there were already a couple of motorcycles in there. And we went back and looked at that article from '99 that was in the weekly, was it the Weekly Planet or something?
That article written by Lynn.
Yeah. And she talked about trying to get a hold of motorcycle titles and stuff like that. And so that was the last time I remember seeing Don. And that was always I never tried to make myself self-important about the investigation, but I always thought, wait a minute, I think I might have been one of the last people to see him that weekend. So that was kind of relevant. The fact that I fed with him and spent a lot of time with him was somewhat relevant. And then the Finn story was kind of maybe relevant. And then there was other stuff. People always want to point the finger. And I keep telling in every interview that I do and everything, and you and I have talked about this in length, follow the evidence. Don't make this a crusade against one person. It's about following the evidence. And there's a lot of different stuff at play in this. There was no love lost between Don and Carol's father, Vernon, between Carol's daughter, Jamie, and Jamie's boyfriend at that point, JD, who I gave you that name. And that. I remember one thing in particular that Don had gone off on a trip, and JD was building something. I don't remember what it was. It might have been a picnic table or something. It was something on the beach. And when Don came back, he destroyed it. And let me just tell you, that's probably sometime around, I think, soon after that when the gun was missing. But and there was a lot of bad blood about that. Nobody was happy with that. And but Don told me, he said, look, I told him if you don't do it the way I tell you, I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to tear it down. And he did. And so there was a lot of different tension and a lot of different. You just can't sit there and say, okay, Carol was the one person you could point the finger at in this. There were so many different, situations at play there. It wasn't even funny. I mean, go ahead.
Wait, you brought up Don and Jamie. Do you know what kind of relationship those two had?
They weren't close. She lived in her own little separate trailer, which I didn't think about much then. I just thought it was kind of cool as a teenager to get your own place. I thought it was kind of, but I didn't think much about past that, like what was the reasoning for that, if there was, but she never seemed to be that close with Don at all. And like I said, that the situation with her boyfriend, that was really, I mean, it was really ugly after that.
Like, can you give us more details about that?
No, there wasn't really any, I mean, just instances where, she wasn't talking to him, that, where, she would just have some sort of like, just stomp off and just not want to deal with him. I mean, there was no smoking gun with any of these people. Like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you. I mean, there's nothing like that. You just saw it as just typical family drama. You could go to anybody's house and see a fight, any given day. It was just stuff like that. It's just only now that you have to go back with, these 20/20 binoculars, something that 23 years ago, and see if you can pick out some sort of little signs. And again, these people that say they can do that, God, they have more power than I do, because I was there and I can't tell you who did it. And I was right in the middle of it, It just wasn't that way. There was enough. I mean, and some of the stuff that Carol puts out there is true. She was spaying and neutering cats when he was gone. She was getting rid of his junk when he was gone. And that was causing fights when he got back. There's no doubt about it, Now, Again, what was the motive for that? Was it to start fights? Was it because you wanted to have this all riled up? You wanted to have it in a constant state of, agitation? Was that your motivation? I don't know. Were you doing it for the right reasons? I don't have the answer to that. But I know it was going on. That's for sure.
Did you ever see a time where Jamie and maybe Don got in an argument or something, and Jamie might have called Vernon to come have a talk with Don or anything like that?
I never saw that, but I think she was closest to her grandfather. I think, she would have called him, because as a matter of fact, I got into it with her second boyfriend, Daniel Capiro. I got into him one night on property, and he and I just came short of blows. And she called her grandfather, and he showed up there. So she didn't call mom. That's who she called was grandfather. So yeah, I mean, if she would call somebody, it would have been him for sure.
How long did it take Vernon to show up when you and Daniel about got into it?
Probably not more than 10 minutes.
So he was there pretty quick.
Pretty quick. Yeah.
So do you think you could take Daniel?
Well, it was one of those things where it was about to come to it, but I just, I kind of pulled back and I'm like, yeah, no. So fortunately it ended well. It didn't physically, I mean, it came to some pushing and shoving, but it didn't come to any kind of punches thrown. So I was happy with that outcome.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you. But I had heard that if Jamie needed something, she would have called Vernon and not Carol for that.
Absolutely.
So what do you think? What do you think happened? What do you think happened to Don?
Well, Don didn't just disappear. Don didn't just walk away from his money. He loved his money. He loved his cats. He loved his animals. He would not have just walked away. So again, I don't have, I wish I could give you, a definitive answer. But again, I go back to a really horrible investigation that, in my opinion, was never done to the extent of anywhere close to what it should have been. There was so much junk on that property, and we spoke about that Carol was getting rid of parcels of it while he was gone. Well, after he disappeared, it started going off in truckloads. I mean, truckloads. And with the amount of stuff,
who was helping haul that stuff off?
Well, I think she had everybody that she could get out there was working on it. Her dad, probably Kenny was out there too, running, because Kenny, I think, ran a lot of the big equipment like the dozers and stuff out there. So he was probably loading it. And as a matter of fact, if you want to see the level of interesting junk and stuff that's out there, you have a photo of what was right behind my house.
Is it the one that you sent? It's one of these.
Yes.
I'm gonna put my glasses on. Oh no, I don't think I have it. No, I have.
You don't have the boat?
Oh wait, boat?
Yeah, that's it. That was in my backyard.
Oh, that was in your backyard right there.
That was in my backyard when I lived at Easy Street. That was the
Okay.
level. Yeah, the top boot was my joke there.
Okay.
And then you recognize that to the left of Das Boot is Judy Watson, who you had on the other night. John McKinney's to her left, who lived with her out on property and then worked for them as well. But that's I hate to use a boat and an iceberg analogy here, but that boat is just the tip of the iceberg about what was out there and what went off that property after Don went missing. And you know what? To the best of my knowledge, not one drop of that stuff was ever searched by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Not one bit of it. All the talk about meat grinders and septic tanks and all this other stuff, that stuff you could have shipped 1,000 bodies out of there, and the amount of stuff that was out there, from construction equipment to construction materials to boats, for God's sakes. I mean, there was so much of it out there. I never saw cadaver dogs ever out on property. I never saw them search that property, and I never saw them search all that junk that went off property and left there. So it was one of those things where, that's where I saw the failings at, and that's where I say you'll be lucky if this ever gets solved, unless there are probably a couple of people that do have some answers, and that maybe they will, come forward to the right people and answer these questions. But much time has gone by now.
Yeah, I think they will come forward. One of them will soon enough. I know that I know that Kenny Farr was talking to the cops last week. So I know that for a fact. So I don't know if he's I don't know the conversation, but maybe I don't know. That's all I'll say about that. But I know for a fact that Kenny Farr was talking to law enforcement last week. That's
yeah. So that's another thing. I heard about the gun, and I never saw any of Don's guns out there. I never saw his I never saw his gun collection. So that was kind of something on the back end of the deal. So I don't have any first-hand information of that.
Right. All right. Well, let's go to some questions. I want to get some of these questions because there's some pretty good questions. Like, someone wants to know, what do you know about Costa Rica? Do you know anything about Costa Rica?
The only thing I knew about it was he enjoyed going down there. He went down there frequently. He was definitely planning on moving things down there for sure. That was absolutely, he wanted to do that. I know Carol was not a fan of that. She did not want to move down there. And like I said, at that point I had Magic. So, he kind of thought I might want to go down there and take Magic down there. He talked about opportunities for me down there. But it never really got, it really never got past that. And I never made it down there. So, but he never talked to me about any specifics as far as any of the people down there, or I've heard he has girlfriends or something down there. So I didn't get that far with it.
All right. How soon after Don went missing did Carol start hauling things off?
It became pretty instantaneous. Pretty frequently. But remember, she was doing it before he even went missing. That was a cause of friction with him for sure. She was hauling off junk. But again, I always said it was 70% junk and 30% cats. It was. If you see more pictures back in that day, if people send them in, you'll see what I'm talking about. It was bad. It was really bad. Like I said, the boat was in my backyard, and that was just one of the things that was back there.
Right. Did you know anyone out there named Juan?
No.
All right. Sorry, folks. No one out there named Juan that we can find. And the guy Tim that you brought up, I don't know if I have Tim's last name or not, but I'll text you later. I'll have to go look at my old notes, I guess, because I'm not sure I know about Tim. Let's see what else. All right. They want to know if you ever witnessed Don's dementia. We talked about that, but I think they missed it in the beginning.
Yeah, I really want to clarify several points and that's one of them. I handicap at all. Don was always sharp as a tack. He had, certain little quirks, but they were not due to mental failings at all. Don was absolutely, he was a sharp man, and he was a witty man. And I never, in the dealings I had dealings with him with medical situations on animals and with equipment and with properties, and every conversation that we had, he was on target. He never got lost. He never forgot things. And if he said something to me, I could always take him at his word. I never saw any indication that he had any kind of mental illness whatsoever. None.
Okay, good. How about parties? Did you know about any parties out there?
Oh yeah, we had lots. we had the for the volunteers, and then I do stuff like once I lived out there, I'd have Halloween parties and different type of get-togethers out there. And for the most part, most things were fairly good. I mean, it was a time for me where I didn't have to worry too much about the liability of having the animals, and there was times where there wasn't a lot of drama and strife going on. It was a nice place to be. Okay. But unfortunately, it just, nothing, I guess, can ever stay like that. So,
right. What ketamine? Ketamine's used to put animals to sleep.
Yeah, it's part of sedative. Yeah, it's a mix. I don't know if they kept ketamine on property, and I never worked with that out there. I did. There was at one point. There was a point where we did sedate Lola when she had a breech birth. So they had tranquilization equipment out there, but I never saw it being used other than maybe once or twice like that.
Okay. Did you see Judy Watson's septic system being?
Oh yeah. I mean, her trailer came in and all that stuff.
So you were out there.
I don't remember the exact date. You probably covered the dates better than I probably remember the dates. But again, I'm not a fan of that theory at all. I mean, the fact is, if you have a body and you have over 1,000 pieces of junk that you could dispose of a body in, or you could put it on your own property, the fact is that your suspect list, if that body is discovered on your property, is going to be a small suspect list. Only the people that have access to your property. Whereas if it's off your property, the entire world is potentially a suspect. So that's why I was never a fan of that. And let me just go back to the meat grinder situation. I exclusively fed the big cats out there. When I started to when I gave up the route in early 2000, I had help. There were different volunteers that helped me on the route. But I never saw anything of cats going days without wanting to eat. I never saw anything where there was a consistency of food change, where the food looked different, smelled different. And certainly if you try to introduce a completely different meat source into an animal's diet, based on my experience, you're probably going to have a lot of problems with them changing and eating something completely foreign and new to them. And so I just want to say that I think that's one of those,
Yeah, we talked about that because one of the reasons I wanted to call you a couple of months ago was because I heard that you were in charge of feeding the big cats, and
correct.
You would have known if he would have been fed. Like you should know, but here's something that I don't understand why you weren't questioned, because what I heard was that you could have seen Dawn on Sunday. You were in charge of feeding the big cats. You would have been the perfect person. I mean, you should have been a suspect. I mean,
well, that's one way of looking at it, I guess. I didn't look at myself like that because I like Dawn, so
No,
matter of fact, honest, I'd probably still be living out there, to be honest with you. I would have been perfectly content being there. I wouldn't have, I probably wouldn't have left.
Right, but law enforcement should have looked at you as a suspect, but they didn't even call you, and they never would have had you not reached out to them in the last few months or whatever it was, because you reached out to them, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I reached out to them again this time in 2020 because I wanted to get my, I wanted to get my timeline because it's been so many years. I didn't keep all the different information, the emails and all that stuff. I just kind of got rid of it after the years, and I just didn't want to kind of stay living in a past 20 years ago. So I kind of just got rid of that stuff. But once it seemed like, I really didn't think it was going to come back around again. I really didn't. It just seemed like it was gone, and it wasn't gonna happen. So I wish I had held on to some of that stuff, but apparently, just didn't think it was going to, after that much time had gone by, that it was ever going to be solved, that people were going to care.
Right. Carol said in one diary reading that Dawn would forget to close cat doors and animals would get out. Did you ever see anything like that?
Never.
Okay.
I mean, I saw animals to get out, but they weren't caused. I'm going to have to move here a little bit. I got a puppy dog that wants to go to the bathroom. So she's kind of make my life kind of miserable here. So, the animals that got out were not because somebody let them out. So that would not have happened like that. I never saw Don leave a cage open. But things can happen. I mean, I've done stupid things, forgetful things. So it's possible that that might have happened, but that doesn't necessarily translate to dementia. I mean, for God's sakes, but it wasn't being done on a regular basis where you could sit there and say, oh yeah, he's suffering from this because he's doing it every other day or something like that. I never saw that at all. Never.
Right. Okay. I'm just looking at some of these other questions. Oh, ketamine. Did anyone use any ketamine at any parties out there that you know of?
No. The strongest stuff we had was beer, alcohol. That's it. Let the parties that I was at. So.
Hey, beer. I'm down for beer. I should have had some beer, but last time I did beer on a live, I drank too much.
Gotcha.
Okay, here's one. Why did Carol make you VP after Dawn was gone? Oh God, here's 3 questions. Oh, where'd it go?
Okay. I don't know why she did it. She, like I said, I was on the volunteer committee, and it was just one of those things where she approached me. I mean, there were several people that were on the board. I think Dudley Edwards was on there. I think Judy Watson was on there. So I guess maybe she went VP for me because I had been around longer than most of them had done a lot. So,
okay. Did you talk to Carol after the Bay News 9 expose? Oh boy.
Yeah, I did. She actually called me after that, and she had asked me some questions because, again, I want to reiterate. There's things that she says that are truthful. When she says that she, spayed and neutered because she was trying to spay and neuter, she was. Matter of fact, she neutered Magic in Jumanji while Don was out of town, and I think spayed Aurora while he was out of town, and he wasn't happy about it. Now, again, this is not for me to decide what her motivations were. Were they just truly benevolent motivations, for the non-breeding, or was it, was there something else? Was it more nefarious? Was she looking to have conflict with Dawn? I don't know. I can't answer what was in her mind or in her heart, and I'm not going to try to. I've told you from the very start of this, my narrative is going to be follow the evidence, and every interview I've done, it's kind of like, I'm not here to praise her, but I'm not here to bury her either. I'm here to tell you what I know firsthand. I'm going to try not to get to third-party hearsay stuff,
right.
and I'll give you the names, and then you guys can do your thing, take them down.
Right, and you have been very clear with me, just so people know. He said that from the beginning. He said, I don't know what happened, but I'll tell you what I know, and I'm not picking sides. I just tell you my experience, and I'll give you names of everybody that I can and see what happens.
And
Have
I
you?
will tell you the names that I think know something. There are people. If you gave me certain names, I'd say, yeah, that person didn't know anything. They were there a little bit. They're just looking for their 15 minutes. Blah blah blah. But there were names that of interest that would have would have some inside information on things. Um, and as far as what happened after, when I talked to Carol after that, I think I acknowledged that there was something that was said that, like, I can't remember what it was. It's been so long now, but she asked me, like, well, I was spaying and neutering. I said, yeah, I know you were, and she was, and then so that was enough for her to go, okay, and that was it. And that's probably the last time I caught Carol was that conversation back in 2009.
So you haven't talked to her since the show's come out?
Oh no. After that 2009 Bay News night that she called me. Matter of fact, I remember the conversation. It was right in front of our visitor center, and when I talked to her, and that was the last time I talked to her.
Okay. What about Kenny and Carol? Did you ever see Kenny and Carol have any kind of relationship? Like,
No, I didn't. I never really, like I said, I never saw anything inappropriate with Don and people, and I never saw anything with Carol and people, to be honest with you. Like I said, I saw her spend more time with Susan and Doug, were the two people that I saw her with the most time with, to be honest with you. Again, I'm at work doing a job Monday through Friday. I'm there every night after work, but I'm there at night, and then I obviously moved in there. I probably moved in, I think it was around 98. Somewhere probably early part of 98 that I moved in on property. But no, I never really saw anything like that.
Do you know what happened? The truck that the motorcycles were loaded in, that box van, do you know what happened to that thing?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't know what happened to the titles, that he would have had a title that day, because that was a street legal motorcycle that he bought. Like I said, he might have bought there. I think there were some dirt bikes in there, because I don't think you have to worry about them being street legal down there. But this was a street legal bike, because the guy drove it there and left it.
Yeah. If anybody wants to help find these titles, I've not had any luck tracking down these titles from these motorcycles in '97. All right. Someone says, you saw Don the Sunday before. What was his demeanor on that day?
He was happy. He was giddy. He couldn't wait. He was looking forward to the trip down there, and the stuff he was collecting. You could just see dollar signs rolling in his eyes. He was happy about it. He was very. I remember that distinctly. What I remember after talking to Corporal Garcia on my way home, I was very despondent that they didn't have my interview, from when I gave, that I gave when I called in. And I started thinking about it, and then I started remembering how he was asking me to take this guy home because he had so much to do, and he hated to ask me, and he was really, I'm really sorry, Jim, I don't mean to but I got so much to do to get ready, and blah, blah. And so I remember him being rushed and harried, but at the same time, what I remember, my first impression that day was how happy he was. He was buying this. He was getting it ready to go, and he was gonna. It looks like he was just going. He had this thing filled with stuff, and he was just going to make a killing down there on this stuff. And I think he was just thrilled about that. And also, let me just also point out, besides the fact that I don't think he would have left intentionally, I don't think he would have wandered off, because I never saw any signs of dementia or anything else. I also don't think Don would have been a victim of a robbery. Don would not have been the kind of person you would look to rob. Like I said, he would be the person you would look to give $1 to. I mean, you hand him money because he died in this dumpster. He drove crappy vehicles. He looked like crap. He would not be a robbery candidate. So I completely dismissed that as well. And the fact that his van was left at an airport signifies to me that was somebody that had knowledge, that he had some basic flight skills, and it would make a great diversion. And I never for 1 second ever believed Don got on a plane and flew away. Don't believe that now, and didn't believe it then, and I'll never believe that.
Who knew that he had flight skills?
Well, I think everybody did. I mean, everybody knew. Everybody is, was aware that the two of them went to pick up one of the tigers that flew to get it. And I think one of their first incarnations was it like Wildcat on Wings of Wildcat or something like that. I mean, yeah. So I mean, and he had an ultralight parked out on the lake. So I mean, it would have definitely been somebody that knows him. You would have had some kind of working knowledge of Don to know he had that skill. So it wouldn't have been just some sort of random situation. And that airport was fairly far out from because I live just past that airport now, and I drive to Town and Country. So I drive past Easy Street each day, and I have to come past that airport each day. And that's a good 35-minute drive from there. And matter of fact, back then the veterans didn't exist, so it would have been even a longer drive than that.
Right. All right. Just a couple more questions because I know you got to get up and work tomorrow. Did you ever see Don without his phone?
No, he usually had his phone, on him, but a lot of times he was working, so he wasn't necessarily answering it. That particular weekend, I don't remember whether he had it on him or not. I don't remember. The memory is just too much time. So I don't remember if I ever saw him with his cell phone on, but as I spoke with you, he was on property. So he had to have been connecting with this guy with a motorcycle to make the arrangements. So he had to have been communicating with the guy. So I just assumed, if it wasn't through his cell phone, if he didn't have it, he was using the landline at Easy Street.
Okay.
Again, phone records from that day.
What's that?
St. Pete. Phone records from that day for St. Pete.
Oh, well, it'd be nice if law enforcement didn't lose the phone records. That would be nice.
They seemed to lose a lot, didn't they?
And they continue to keep losing stuff, apparently. Did Carol have a station wagon? Do you know if she had a station wagon?
I thought it was a Jeep.
Okay, so no station wagon. All right, one more question. A Jeep, not a station wagon. One more question. A cat named Candy. Do you know about a cat named Candy? Is it caracal cat?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall a cat named Candy?
I remember that. Yeah, I remember a caracal named Candy, but I don't remember what event you're looking for on that though.
Do you know what happened to that cat? Like, do you know when it died or anything about it?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Do most of the cats out there, like when they would die, what would happen to them?
They get buried out there.
They get buried. And then do most of the cats have plaques?
But I also heard that she had also had some, had sent some to have them stuffed. But yeah, taxidermy. But I don't know that I ever saw any taxidermy, but I'd heard that some of them had been sent out for that, but some of them were buried out there for sure.
Right. Okay. But you don't know what happened to the cat Candy, but when some cats die, they have like a plaque and all these things, right, for the cats. They
started doing that after I was gone. They had a cemetery out there with just little markers and stuff, and but they didn't really. They didn't have all the stuff they have now. They did have a little cemetery. They had some markers and stuff out there, but
okay.
It wasn't anything like they have out there now.
Okay. All right.
Well, I have on property. I haven't been out there since mid 2000. So that was the last time I stepped foot on property out there.
Right. I got you. All right. Someone's asking about Don and Jamie's relationship, but we already went over it. They did not have a good relationship. Don and Jamie did not.
Don had a worse relationship with her boyfriend at the time, which created even worse conflict between them. But again, I can't tell you from what I saw, just different little pieces here and there. I can't really put together how horrible it was, but it was definitely not a warm and fuzzy one, that's for sure.
Right. I'm going to ask.
Vern did not like Don, and it was just, again, not a warm and fuzzy relationship at all.
Right. I've already asked you this before, but I'm going to again because it was one of the first things that when I first talked to you. But you worked with Don. You spent time with him. He goes missing. When did Carol come to you and ask you if you'd seen or heard from Don?
I don't think she ever did. I mean, I don't think she ever specifically came to me and said, "Hey, I think I showed up one night and I think there was just stuff going on, and that's how I found out that he was actually missing." I don't think she ever came to me. Like I said, I was never put out there as potentially somebody that should be talked to, that I might have some information.
Right.
And,
but she never did ask you if you had seen or heard from him. How'd you learn that he was missing?
Like I said, I think I just showed up there to feed one day, and I think there was just a flurry of activity going on out there, and that's how I found out about it.
Okay.
So it was not something that she came to me and asked me about, had I seen him or anything like that. So there were a lot of people out there that were. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was just a bunch of activity out there. There was extra volunteers out there when I got there, and I don't know, I can't remember now if it was police or news media or something, and that's how I actually found out about it.
Right, and you never, media never came and talked to you. The police never questioned you.
Most of those interviews, if you look, I'm not even. They got people's names in there that I remember that were out there one day a week or something, and I don't even know if they even met Don, and they're interviewed in these pieces. I was stunned by all that. I don't think it was until and even Lenora from that article that she just went back and revisited in the St. Pete Times. She did an article back then on that. Was it 2005 or something? Seven. And she obviously had an interview with me, and I asked her to pull up, if she could find her notes, and she can't. To this point, she hasn't found those notes. But the only thing she put in that article that she quoted me on was describing Don. And I know if I talked to her, I would have given her more information about the timeline of when I saw Don and what happened, and there would have been a lot more information there. But it didn't get used. But in all the other articles, I was never even approached, never even asked about it. So.
Right. And then when you came back from taking that guy back to St. Pete, Don wasn't there. You didn't see him. When
I don't know that I ever came back because it was going to be so late. And I think at that point we lost our light. And I think I just took Jamie home, and I lived around the corner at that point. I was only literally 2 blocks from Easy Street. So I think I just went on home. I don't think I would mount up back there again.
Okay. I got you. Well, is there anything else you need to put out there that we didn't talk about before I'll let you go? It's an hour and a half. Thank you for spending so much time.
Oh, you're welcome. Like I said, my hope, and again, in this is that, that this will get back and the public will cry out enough that they want some answers, and that law enforcement will, definitely, do a better job than what they did, back in, when this first happened.
They can't do worse.
Well, let's not say that. You can always do worse. One of the things that, one of the names that I'd given you as a person of interest was the Tim, who was, he was employed, at Easy Street, and from what I understand, he had failed the bounty hunter license, and that's why he was working out there. And
I told you about talking with him, right? Have I told you this?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
But I don't know if I told you the rest of the story that involved him, but there was a point where Magic was in with his brother Jumanji and Aurora the tiger, and I every time I'd go and see him when I didn't live on property, I would have to deal with them, and they would be aggressive, and I'd have problems. And I suspected that it was this Tim fellow, and because he seemed to be really kind of rough and played. You can't interact with a big cat a certain way, because when they get big enough, you're not going to be able to handle what they're doing. When they want to play that rough with you, it's going to get
bad,
dicey.
Yes.
Yeah, and they had set up this photo pen, and you probably can find pictures of like I think it's a picture of a leopard standing on a big tree trunk. They created this big circular pen and put this big piece of tree down in the middle of it. And it's called the photo pen. And you would take in a photographer, and then you'd have one person with a photographer and one person kind of wrangling the cat. And after this one particular session, I watched Tim come out and took this leopard Sundari and kind of put her on his shoulders, like Tarzan would put a cat over his shoulders like this and walking down the road. And I remember it was right outside of Magic and Jumanji's cage on the lake near food prep there. And I was talking to Carol about it, and I told her that I had concerns about that and him getting hurt. And there's some conversations you have that just kind of laser etch into your brain. I don't know why, but they just do. And this was one of those where she goes, I don't know what it is about people like Tim and Sandy, but it's like the cats don't hurt them because they realize they're simple-minded. Now, first of all, that's a little bit of a misnomer, because a simple-minded animal, if you have, not to be politically incorrect, but if you have a mentally challenged, caribou that's going in circles, that's going to be the first thing they're going to go after. The young, the weak, and the old is what predators prey on. But where this kind of comes full circle is after Dawn disappeared, and I don't know what the timeline was, but maybe months or so after it'd been gone, I came into property. I think I was living there, so I just walked into the gate, and Carol was there with Tim, and he had left somewhere after Dawn had disappeared, or before, so somewhere in that timetable he had left. But there he was back talking to Carol, and he was leaving. And I just walked up to her and I said, "What's Tim doing back?" And she said that she was hiring him to look for Dawn.
Right. And she did hire him.
I'll let you, again, that's a story that that was first, party, there was no third party on that. There was A and B, and that was a direct conversation both times. And I relayed that story again. I thought it was an interesting story. I know I told it back in the day when I called in, and I don't know. You can make what you want out of it, but.
All right, for those that don't know, Tim was a bounty hunter. But I think at the time when Dawn went missing, he was actually working as a lumberjack. And Dawn went missing. She ends up hiring this guy who was a bounty hunter, paid him $7 an hour plus gas. That's what she paid for someone to go find her missing husband. But later she said she hired a private investigator. But he wasn't a private investigator. He's a bounty hunter, which bounty hunters can find people too. But if it were me, I'd pay more than $7 an hour if my spouse went missing. I'd have a group set up, and I would have everybody and their dog out looking, and it would be an endless search. I guarantee it. But anyway, yeah, you did give me that name.
Yeah, we did put together a search. As being in the volunteer committee, I helped put together a search day. It would have been, you guys were talking about that. It would not have been on the weekday because I work, so it would have been on the weekend that we did it. And it probably would have been, I don't know, within 2 weeks probably of when Dawn disappeared. And Carol was not out in the search part of it, but she was at the meeting that we held, because we put up a board and white erase board, and we're putting up information. And that property, the second property that we went to look at, that was right down the street from the airport, was actually 300 acres. It was a large parcel, large parcel, and she told us about that parcel as well. So she did give us that information to look at that while we were out there.
Hey, one more question. Did you ever go to the property out at Sefner, the 172 acres? Did you ever see that property?
No, I did not. The only properties that I've ever been to besides the Easy Street property is the 300 acres that they did own, which I think she sold somewhere after that, out on 52, which was near the airport. And I don't remember now how big the parcel was, but that piece of environmentally protected land I told you about that I went to look at off of. Those are the only 2 parcels of property that I was ever on, outside of Easy Street.
All right, I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate you coming here. One more thing. If there was a large reward that was posted, do you think that would help make someone come forward and talk?
I think it's possible. But you got people that are scared. You got people that have animals, and it's easy to hurt people with animals because you just go after their animals. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the beast. And so you got a lot of people with a lot of different reasons, and maybe some are more nefarious than others. Maybe they have a reason because they were involved in it. But I think a reward would be I think a reward would have been a good place to start 23 years ago, to be honest with you.
Right. So, all right, everybody, stay safe out there. Hold on. Someone said memorial is August 15th. They're asking, will you go to the memorial?
Yes, I am going. I already signed up for
it. Good. I will see you there then. All right, everybody, that's it. Earlier when I said I was going to let you go, there's a lot of people that said thanks for coming here, thanks for your time, and I appreciate anybody and everybody that comes on here, especially they do it for free because I haven't paid anybody for any interviews. I just want to put that out there. So the person that is saying that, you can kiss my actually, you can't kiss anything. But anyway, Jim, thank you very much for coming here. Stay safe, and I will talk to you later, I'm sure. We'll see you, everybody.
Thanks, Ripper.
I'm Ripper. That's Jim, and we're out. Hey, don't go anywhere, Jim.
You got it.
All right.